Greetings, Wanderer, which is, I guess, a fitting welcoming phrase for people who want to learn more about an upcoming science fiction game. My name is Chris, aka The Philosopher's Games, or TPhGames as my little games channel here is called, and today I want to talk about the upcoming Cyberpunk 2077 expansion, Phantom Liberty, which will be released 26th of September 2023 and cost around about $30, €30, or I think £25. There's quite a bit of information when it comes to this expansion and to changes also coming to the base game as a free update. I have like 2 pages of just notes and I just want to give you a brief overview here and try to explain a few things. I try to keep this story spoiler free, but of course I have to show you something, so there will be trailer footage. But enough introduction. As far as I know, originally CD Projekt planned to release 2 DLCs for Cyberpunk, but after its disastrous launch, they just decided to make it one big DLC. And often DLC sounds like some horse armor, but in this case it's a full-blown expansion of the game. Think of The Witcher Blood and Wine. It's really big and will change also the game quite a bit, or let's say it even will change the base game quite a bit with the next update that is coming for free to the people who just own the base game. So it might be worth checking Cyberpunk 2077 if you not plan on getting the expansion Phantom Liberty for it. Also, the update might be called 1.7, we are currently on 1.62 plus Hotfix, and they said in an interview they won't release 1.7 earlier than 9th of September, so it will potentially come a little bit later. The DLC, as said, releases 26th of September, so I assume there will be this free update which will change a lot of things in the base game, and then Phantom Liberty comes with additional changes, a new campaign and so on. We talk about this in a moment. Phantom Liberty, the expansion, has of course, as said, a new campaign that plays in a new place called Dogtown, which is technically already on the map. It is in Pacifica between the Eastern Hills and Coastview and Westwind Estate. So currently you potentially see me flying over it here on the map a little bit, and it is not modeled out. Maybe you remember there was a big wall with like a gate you couldn't pass where all these homeless people were living, and I assume that is the entrance to that particular place. And if you fly around there, I'm using a no-clip mod, I link it in the description, you see that the models of the buildings and so on are very low detail and nothing is really there. In the information we have so far, Dogtown is described as a walled-off place, and so it must be that one, because this area here you can't enter by normal means, you need like some mod or cheat to get there. The expansion itself plays in parallel to the main game, and at a certain point in the main game you get a call that starts a mission to go there, and it seems later you can also exit and enter Dogtown freely, but at the beginning it's pretty walled off and you need this particular mission. Rumors are you get this call when you are early on into the Voodoo Boys missions. The story itself is often described as spy thriller and has to do with the president of the new United States of America. Another noteworthy character must be Solomon Reed, because he's played by no other than Idris Elba, and people who have seen him said he's absolutely fantastic. On top of that, there will also be a lot of Johnny Silverhand, played by Keanu Reeves, and the developers said almost as much as in the base game, which is pretty insane, so it seems those two might play a very big role again, especially Johnny Silverhand, and it might be interesting to see how this is developed. I heard in some interviews that they might show some new nuances and sides of Johnny Silverhand as a character, which might be interesting. Of course, there will also be other characters. We have seen in trailers a character called Songbird and another character called Kurt Hansen, and he has, it seems, his own new faction. I'm personally not very worried about the characters and how they are written, because that is one of the biggest strengths of Cyberpunk 2077 and of CD Projekt Red, so I assume this will also carry over to the DLC, and especially if you have like a great actor like Idris Elba portraying one of these characters, that might definitely be something. And of course you could criticize the story of Cyberpunk 2077 for not exploring some of the classic cyberpunk themes in detail, or detailed enough But it also had some interesting ideas, and especially in some of its sub-stories, so in side missions and so on, we explored some ideas that were kind of shocking and made me at least think for a bit, and I still have those missions quite well in my mind, which definitely shows that the game does at certain places also a lot of things right, even in its storylines. And now in the DLC, in a much more confined or focused story, potentially using a different approach, I can definitely see how they might even improve further on this in this DLC. So I definitely see the potential here. Also, we have to keep in mind that this is still a video game, and video games are interactive. For some games, our interactions and decisions have an impact on its story, and Cyberpunk 2077 was a game like this, even though in some areas quite limited, and often I would have wished more options and possible outcomes and more decisions to make here and there. But of course, there are only so many possible options you can implement into a game. However, the DLC will have multiple endings of its own story, and it seems that these endings, or at least one of these endings, also unlocks a new ending for the base game, which I find very interesting. Beyond that, they also add a lot of new stuff. There will be more side missions that are not main story missions in the DLC, and also new weapons, clothes, vehicles, and so on. In Dogtown there's also a black market where you can buy very powerful stuff, and some of it also seems to have drawbacks. I'm not sure if this only is related to the cyberware stuff or also to weapons. Also, some people reported that the character models looked better than in the base game, so potentially they updated them as well. Now, all of that already sounds pretty great for an expansion, but there's a lot more to uncover here. Virtually no system of the original game has been left untouched, so the developers said in an interview. And now we come to a lot of system changes and additions that in parts will also come to the base game. Some though are also exclusive to the DLC. It's so much that I will link you my document in the description. The skill trees and their perks have been reworked completely. The base game on launch was quite a bit criticized for having some, let's call it, interesting perk ideas. For example, there was one perk called Commando. You cannot be detected underwater. On paper it sounds useful, but in the game there are literally like maybe 3 situations where this could have been useful, and otherwise it's just completely useless. Another one was called Stronger Together. Increases damage you deal while carrying a body. Well, you need another perk to actually shoot while carrying a body, so just skilling this perk alone doesn't make anything. So it is a lot of ifs to make this in any shape or form useful. However, the perks were already a bit at least reworked in the game, mostly I think in patch 1.5. So Stronger Together was changed to Tenacious V, getting hit does not interrupt health regeneration, which is actually useful, or Commando was changed to Looking Sharp. Headshots with throwing knives apply blinding to the target, also a nice idea. There are, however, still some perks in the game that aren't that useful, at least in their current combination. For example, Lead Sponge and Acrobatic. One allows you to dodge while aiming and the other allows you to shoot while dodging. Though there is a difference between both of these perks, it could be just one perk in my opinion. Now with the expansion, or I think version update 1.7, they plan on making the perks more active abilities. For example, you can now deflect bullets with your sword, that will be a perk, or there will be new finishes and so on. So less passive stuff, more active stuff, which is I think not bad. Though I personally also liked some of the ludicrous passive stats that you could get and then just bring or pump up your damage to like past the 1,000,000 damage per shot. That was also kind of funny, to be honest, but I can definitely see that this makes more sense for a game like this. And there comes also some other reworks that tie to this. We come to this in a moment. It also seems like they want to add ability scaling to the game. How they want to achieve this is not 100% clear to me. Maybe they add like modifiers that, for example, are tied to an attribute, and if you increase your attribute you do more damage, so there's classic attribute scaling. There might also be other stats in the game that scale then with the abilities, who knows, we will see when it comes out. They also want to add new movement abilities in the perks as well, so beyond like modifying your cyberware and getting a double jump or something, they now said you can get an air dash in the reflexes tree now, which I also find very interesting. I always like new movement options. And then I mentioned something ties to this new perk rebalancing. They also changed the difficulty curve of the game and, for example, how healing works in the game. They want to make healing more effective and that it has cooldown now, but they also changed how basically damage is calculated and how armor works in the game. And this is, in my opinion, a very huge update, because currently, especially on the higher difficulties, if you get hit, you're almost down to 0 in 1 or 2 hits. And then you have to maybe hide somewhere, except you are just insanely tanky with a lot of armor. And if that's not the case, it's often like you get hit once, go into cover, chuck a healing item, and then try to shoot 1 or 2 people down, get hit again, chuck another. Like it's a lot of healing yourself a lot in this game, and they want to break this gameplay loop a bit and make it more interesting, which I highly appreciate. They also said that armor is now tied to cyberware instead of clothes, according to GameSpot. And this is interesting. I would prefer if they would do something like both, like you can also, if you don't want to use cyberware, that you can get armored clothes or so. I kind of like this approach that you could use these mod slots in your jacket and then put armor in there. That kind of made a lot of sense to me, but we will see how it works when it's done. Maybe from a balancing perspective, the new system works very well, but it's also not like I didn't like the old system. I just would have wished that armor was maybe a bit more efficient. In this context, they have also mentioned how they have redone progression in the game. For example, they have redone the item tiers and loot drops in the game. I assume potentially also experience points and so on and so forth. So all this kind of is tied together, I think. I also read somewhere that they reworked the, let's call it, I get experience points for doing it progression system in the game. Originally, every skill tree in the game has an own progression system like this, and this is now changed and more generalized, and they reduced those to 5, I assume for each attribute 1, and hopefully made it more interesting. I thought it was a nice idea in the original game, but I can definitely see how they tweak this a little bit. In this context, your attribute and perk progression was also somewhat changed and also put into different tiers, if I understood this correctly. Further, they mentioned also that the UI has been updated and that they also have redone the enemy archetypes, so I assume this means more enemy variety, enemies with different equipment and abilities facing you. In this context, they also mentioned better enemy AI, and the people on this hands-on event also noticed that without anybody saying it to them, that the AI just behaved smarter than in the base game. I also found one source that was present at this hands-on event, shoutouts to GameStar.de, and they reported that there will be an interesting change regarding weapons. It seems now when you shoot you lose a bit of stamina, and if you run out, your accuracy goes down, so a very interesting mechanic. It could be a bit annoying, I have to admit, but maybe it's interesting because usually you are not continuously firing with your weapon, it's more like single powerful shots or bursts that you do in this game. So this could work in my opinion. We also see this in the footage CD Projekt has provided. Regarding hacks or quick hacks, the report also mentions that they got reworked and that you can now stack hacks and that there are more things you can hack. So that also sounds good. It's a bit strange that hacks haven't really been mentioned in interviews so far, but I assume there are just so many changes that some just fly under the radar. Another big point is that they want to make the city feel more alive. So now they added a lot of random events that can happen there, and this potentially also comes to the base game. So you will see, I don't know, some faction fights, car chases and so on that can happen. They of course also mentioned new activities specifically in Dogtown, but I assume some of this is also coming to the base game. They also mentioned airdrops that can appear somewhere, and you and other factions then try to get this drop and get the potentially very good loot out of this. And they also mentioned that the airdrops and I assume these other events can be repeated indefinitely. So that seems like the city becomes more alive by more interaction possibilities and more stuff happening in the game. That also sounds pretty nice, I have to admit. Then they added vehicle combat and car chases. There were some car changes in the base game as well, but they were basically very scripted and only part of certain missions. Now it seems you can actually shoot out of your car with your gun, and you have seen this already in a CGI trailer before Cyberpunk came out, so this is one of the broken promises that car combat is in the game. You can also use now your katana on your motorcycle as well. But not only that, it seems that some cars also now have weapons, maybe turrets or so, installed, like rocket launchers, Gatlings and so on. And some cars of the base game will be updated and get weapons as well, that they also said in an interview. In this context, vehicles now have weak spots, like their charging ports, and I have to admit, vehicle combat before was not that great. You just shot at the car and then it at some point exploded. The hit feedback was never really good, and it felt very scripted. I assume with these changes it becomes more sophisticated and hopefully more interesting. Also, obtaining cars was changed as well. Currently in the game, it's just like a fixer contacts you and says, hey, I have this car to sell, do you want this? Then you get to the car and buy it. That's basically how it currently works. Now obtaining cars was changed and you have to do career or car stealing missions for a certain NPC we know from the base game, Mama Wells. She has a website and there lists what cars she wants to have, and I assume you get money or the car for it at the end, or both. I'm not sure how it works exactly, but you can repeat these missions indefinitely, so there is at least potential content that keeps you busy for a while if you like cars. You can also get, I assume, some rare cars, especially weaponized cars, by these means, and that sounds at least more interesting than how it is currently in the base game. Also, there is a mention that there might be extra objectives, like getting the car back to Mama Wells without taking damage, and here it comes, you have to maybe also hack a car. That sounds interesting because currently in the game you can't hack cars. It seems they might have also added car hacking. How sophisticated this system might be, I can't tell you because they mentioned it nowhere. Also quick hacking, tree upgrades also, and so on, they also haven't mentioned yet really. I tried to find information about this as well, but it has potential and sounds interesting that they add something like this. Some speculate it might be like in Watch Dogs now, but I don't know. I wouldn't keep my hopes up too high for this. It potentially just means that some cars have some security systems you have to deactivate. This now ends the car section and brings us to another big change in the game, the new police system. The police will be different in Dogtown compared to Night City, so there is a different police system of different units in place that rule there over Dogtown compared to the classic police in Night City. However, there were already, I think, some changes to the police system in the past as well, but not very sophisticated. And the police system in the current game, in the current patch, is just not that great. It often is just, oh, I'm in a fast car, I just keep on driving forward and at some point I lose all my stars and it's no danger at all. On foot it can be a bit annoying, to be fair, or sometimes it's really annoying if you have a wanted level. It seems now on the highest level, of course, max tech, that's basically the special SWAT unit of the police, comes after you. That is currently in the game as well, but they just spawn around you and are very annoying to deal with because they have quite a few upgrades. I assume it becomes now more interesting, maybe more spectacular when maybe they land with some flying vehicles and so on, like we have seen in the anime show. Further, it seems that the confrontation with max tech now also becomes something like a boss fight, they said in an interview, which is interesting. And there will also be multiple archetypes of police depending on your wanted level. I'm not sure if every wanted level has different archetypes, but there will definitely be multiple, and the police will also behave differently, using, for example, stuff like roadblocks. So that sounds very promising, because in the current game, the police system is just, let's say, not that good, to avoid the word trash. Further, the developer also claims that your wanted level or how fast the police reaction is dependent on where you commit the crime. If you shoot somebody in a rich area or section of the map where a lot of important people live, the police will be there really fast, and you might also get faster wanted levels there. But when you're in the middle of nowhere in the desert and, I don't know, shoot somebody, then you might not even get a wanted level, and if you get, it might take quite some time for the police to actually arrive, even though you have a wanted level. And that is something, or an upgrade, the game really needs, because the current system is just so basic, and it would be great to see the police reacting a bit more realistic in the widest sense, and also make it interesting. They also said that on the highest wanted level, fighting max tag becomes like a boss fight. So it sounds actually like a challenge, and maybe also an interesting challenge. Let's cross our fingers and hope it works out. Then there's also the mention of a cyberware capacity system. So if you have too much cyberware equipped, you get like debuffs until you go cyber psycho, as they say, that we also have seen in the anime show. How this works exactly, I have no idea, but it might be interesting to test this stuff out, even though in my playthrough I never used cyberware that much, to be fair. But also the cyberware stuff has been completely reworked as well, so there's just a lot to unpack here. Currently, if you are interested in a system like this, there's a mod called Wannabe Edge Runner, and you can install this and get a kind of similar system where you get a capacity on how much cyberware you can install and how much you can stress your body by replacing parts. Then also tied to this is a new skill tree or perk tree that is called the Relic tree. And if you currently go into the game and check the attribute screen, you also see a little thing you can't currently click on, but it says Relic. I assume that is exactly this. And it contains perks that you can unlock that potentially help you to increase your cyberware capacity. It seems like there was this one perk that lets you use more cyberware, but you get a health penalty. They kind of implied that the perks in this particular tree are more cyberware related and also often have like some negative drawback in some way. So that sounds quite interesting, I have to say. This perk tree will be DLC only though, because to upgrade it you need so-called Relic points, and those you only get by exploring Dogtown, so it seems that will not be in the base game. And this slowly brings us to the end of this summary overview video, and that is quite impressive, I have to say. So what can owners of the base game expect from this upgrade without getting the expansion? And I will potentially say the word base game a lot in the following section. There will definitely be the skill tree and perks rework, and also the changes to armor and damage and difficulty and enemy variety and how healing works in this game, and potentially also all these new abilities that you will get. This doesn't sound huge, but this changes how the combat in the game feels and works quite a bit, and that might be something very positive. Even though I liked the combat, but my approach was always just try to get as much damage as possible and giggle about the high damage numbers I can get. But this might not be for everyone, and also I would appreciate if other approaches would be more viable. Though I have to admit, shotgun builds are really fun in this game, when you're at least maxed out and you feel like the Terminator. But it is absolutely needed that this system is upgraded, in my opinion, and I think they have understood what they have to do to get a better experience there. I think this is potentially one of the biggest things, and like the police system upgrade ties to it, vehicle combat might also be added to the base game, though I assume that most weaponized cars are DLC cars. Though they mentioned that some of the standard cars in the game will also be weaponized and upgraded as a result, I assume that vehicle combat is coming to this base game upgrade as well. Further, of course, also a very big thing is more enemy variety and better enemy AI, but that's also part of the combat. Another big thing is potentially that they want to make the city feel more alive. That I think could be very huge. I personally like to walk or drive through the city and look at everything at highest graphic settings, because the game is just so gorgeous and the atmosphere is just so rich. That definitely always fascinated me, just going through the city and looking at everything, and they just put so much work into it. But unfortunately, when you do this a lot, you notice that in the base game you can't interact with many things. I would just wish that there were more interaction options. There's one mod I really like that allows me to interact with almost every vendor in the game. Like every time you see somebody selling food or drink or whatever, in the base game, you can't do anything with him. With this mod, you can just press F and then at least buy something there. It's not much, but it definitely makes it feel more alive already. It's just such a little change that you would have to do. Now, if they would add random faction fights and card chases and whatnot, this might really do the trick when it's not like in the current game, where at specific places there spawns like a police car chasing another car, or there are some gang fights at very predefined positions that can happen, but it's not dynamic. It feels like scripted. It would be great if it's just, how to say, unpredictable what happens. That is definitely a thing they should add to the game, and I think they are on the right track there. But you get the point. Now, the last question, of course, remains, which I briefly want to address, is this all sounds great on paper, but can CD Projekt deliver? I think this time they might be able. However, it could still be that people are angry, and rightfully so. It was a very greedy move to push out the game to get these juicy last-gen sales for PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. Keep in mind, Phantom Liberty only releases for Xbox Series S and X, PlayStation 5 and PC, so for current-gen systems. But I think they can pull it off, because now they have a decent foundation. They patched this game for 1.5 years, and I think only in 1.6 or so we got some additional missions and actual new content for the game for free. And it shows just how much extra time they needed to fix the game. Now they have a solid foundation for, I guess, quite some time now, and can focus on this expansion. They don't have to bring it to last-gen consoles, which also helps. And that is why I'm carefully optimistic. The groundwork was already done, the game is in a good state, all they need to do is deliver good content and upgrade those systems, which isn't easy, but I think they took their time with 2.5 years of development, and that might be enough in the end to deliver a pretty solid experience here with Phantom Liberty. And this brings us to the end of this video. The only point I have left is that the director for Phantom Liberty will make the sequel of Cyberpunk 2077. So let's hope he's successful, and that next time they maybe can develop a game and have enough time to actually finish it. That would be really fantastic. This year we also had some pretty terrible releases of good games. For example, Jedi Survivor is a fantastic game, but the technical state of it is not great. But it's a different topic. Let me know if you plan on playing Phantom Liberty expansion, what your plans are there. Do you start a new character, or do you play with your existing one? Or if you even haven't played Cyberpunk yet and basically play the whole thing when the expansion drops, let me know that in the comments. I also have not decided what I will do with it, if I play with my existing character or make a new one yet. I will definitely play the expansion though on Twitch, so maybe leave a follow there as well. Then if you're still listening to this far too long video, maybe press the like button and subscribe and press the annoying bell, or check the main channel if you're into Lord of the Rings stuff. So all that's left to say now is thank you people for watching. What is next on this channel I have not fully decided yet. I definitely want to do also another Cyberpunk video with a little mod highlight. There are so many cool mods out there for the game, and people might be interested in some of those and potentially want to know what is good and where do I get those and what do I have to do to install them, which is mostly pretty easy. Then on top of that, I might still do a little path tracing highlight video for Cyberpunk as well. There's definitely a lot of Cyberpunk content currently planned here, because that's a game I'm very interested in. I'm looking forward how this turns out at the end. Further, I also want to continue the Gollum Let's Play on the Lord channel, so check this out if you're into Lord of the Rings stuff. And I don't know, that's basically it. Other stuff I play on Twitch, so as said, maybe leave a follow there. Currently a lot of Street Fighter 6, and we might try out Lies of P, the demo. I have not tried it yet. And yeah, stuff like that. I would say huge shout outs and thank you to all the supporters in my community for always being nice, and for the people writing nice chat comments. Really much appreciated. Again, thank you people for watching, and see you next time. Goodbye.